Today, I want to share a video that was recorded live inside my Facebook group. This is a Q&A video where I was answering questions. If you have a question that you would like to ask, you can email me at sarah@homeschoolingforhim.com. Enjoy the video. Okay, so the first thing that I think is really important for us as parents when we're helping our kids focus on reading is that we really want to set them up for success. And I think that this is something whenever my kids are struggling with something in our homeschool or just in life in general, I first want to look at myself and just make sure that I am setting them up for success the best that I possibly can, and that I am creating an environment where I'm doing everything within my power to help them be successful. And I'm doing that before I'm asking them to make any changes. So it's just kind of a philosophy that I think is really important. And so there's a lot of things that we can do as parents and as homeschool teachers to create an environment where our kids will be able to focus better. And so I think that this is the first thing that can be really helpful to think about. So I want to share just a couple of things that you can think through as sort of a mental checklist, just to make sure that you are creating an environment where your kids really can focus as best as they can. So the first thing and the most important thing is that you want to keep your reading lessons really short. And hopefully you have heard me talk about this before, because I talk about it a lot because I think it's really important. The rule of thumb that I like to suggest is that we make our lessons no longer than 2 to 5 minutes times your child's age for any given subject. So your reading lesson as a part of your homeschool day should not be more than 2 to 5 minutes times your child's age. So right now I have a 4-year-old that I'm working with through the Reading Better Together curriculum and with Learning to Read for her turn. And so because she's 4, I'm going to use the formula and multiply 4 times 2 is 8, or 4 times 5 is 20. So I want her reading lessons to be somewhere between 8 and 20 minutes. And especially if you have a child who really struggles to stay focused, or a child that's kind of on the younger range, you want to keep that closer to the lower end of the range than the higher end. So for her, I'm shooting for about 8 minutes for our reading lesson. That's my goal. And as a parent, it can be really tricky to do this because it can be really easy to get excited about your lesson plan, or to feel like you really just need to finish the thing and you're so close and you just want to be done with it and check it off. But the truth is that if we are pushing our kids beyond their ability to focus, then that's when frustration and discouragement can really start to set in. And especially if we're doing it consistently over a period of days and weeks, that can start to get our kids frustrated about the process of learning to read overall. So it's really, really important to keep those lessons short. And I would actually challenge you, if you have not done this in a while, to set a timer the next time you do a reading lesson for your child, and just to be aware for yourself of how long it's taking. I know that this is something that I like to do periodically because I tend to have sort of a warped sense of time once we start doing a homeschool lesson. I often will get very into it and time will pass quicker than I think it has, and all of a sudden it's been much longer than I intended for it to be. So try that, just set a timer and just see what happens when it goes off, because chances are it's going to go a lot quicker than you think. And the reality is that your kids could just have a shorter lesson, and that would solve a lot of the problems with focus. Another thing that you can do to really help your kids focus on reading is to really think about the place that you're asking them to read. So you want to find a place that's really comfortable for them, because if they're uncomfortable, that can be distracting. And you also want to find a place that's free from distractions as much as possible. That can be really tricky, especially if you're homeschooling more than one child. So you want to think really intentionally about what you're going to be doing with those siblings while your child is learning to read and while you're having those reading lessons with them. You want to make a plan for what each sibling is going to be doing, and then you want to teach that sibling those abilities and those skills of how to behave during that reading lesson, and specifically teach them what you want them to do if they get stuck, or if they need your help, or if they have a question during that time. Make sure that you're really intentional with them about how you want them to handle it if they need something from you and you're in the middle of a reading lesson. That'll help minimize distractions as well. So you really want to work on the environment that you're in and make sure that it's quiet and that there's not a whole lot of stuff around and that it's very free from distractions. It's really interesting just how much the environment really impacts our kids' ability to focus. My son has been going to a new place, and there are tons of fun games and activities there. And so I have noticed that he normally is able to focus pretty well, but when we go to this particular new place and he sees all of the new toys and games and he wants to try all of the things all at once, he really has a hard time focusing in that environment. And so environment really makes a big difference, and it's something that's really important to consider when you're teaching your child how to read. Another thing that you really want to think about is the time of day, and in particular, you want to make sure that your child is not hungry or tired when you're teaching reading, because if you think about that as an adult yourself, it's probably harder for you to stay focused on activities that you're doing when you're so tired that you really just need to go take a nap, or when you're so hungry that you can't even. And so I think it's really important that we consider that with our kids as well, and that we think about what time of day we're teaching reading to make sure that our kids' basic needs are met and that they're full and that they're not tired and that they're ready to go with their reading lesson. And then another thing to think about is just how you're structuring your lessons, making sure that you're including lots of fun activities and that you're really making reading time a lot of fun for your kids and keeping them engaged with the way that their reading lessons are happening as well. So all of those are things that we can think about before we even ask our kids to do anything that will help them be able to focus on reading a little bit more. And I think that as a homeschool parent, it really does need to start with us, and we really need to try to do everything that we can to set our kids up for success first and foremost. And so just kind of running through those activities as a checklist, I think can help us to make sure that we are setting our kids up for success as much as possible. Okay, so the second thing that I think is really, really helpful when we're trying to get our kids to focus on reading is that we give them brain breaks. And this is something that we want to be doing throughout our homeschool day to help our kids stay focused and to help them sort of reset and regain that ability to focus again. So when you're structuring a brain break for your kids, you want something that's going to get them up, get them moving, and get some activity happening for them. So this can be really tricky to do sometimes. Sometimes you have to think really creatively. I live in a state where it's too cold to go outside without a lot of snow gear, like, I don't know, at least 8 or 9 months out of the year, and it's raining a lot of the time when it's warm. So this is really tricky for us. We have a lot of things that we do inside that can really help. You can do any kind of outdoor activities that you can think of. Trampolines are great for this. Running around in the backyard is great for this. Or you can do indoor activities. So sometimes we'll even do indoor running at our house. We have a long hallway, and I'll tell one of my kids to run from one end of the hallway to the other 5 times or 10 times. And those kinds of things can help them get the blood flowing as well. Another thing that we are just incorporating now that is really working well for my kids and for our family is animal walks. So these are just a really fun way for kids to get moving, for them to practice different skills with coordination and building muscles and stuff. And they're a lot of fun. So I actually have these that we got. We printed this set of animal walk cards off of Teachers Pay Teachers, and I just wanted to show you these because they're super cute. There's like little printed cards that I laminated. They've got the name of the animal on one side, and then on the back they have directions for how to do it and ideas of what to think about. And most of the cards actually show a little kid doing the animal walk as well. So there's a lot of this kind of information just online. If you search for animal walks, you don't probably have to buy the cards from TPT. I just thought they were cute. But there's lots of information out there that you can find about animal walks. You also might want to look up heavy work. This is an occupational therapy term for activities that give kids lots of feedback in their muscles, and those kinds of things can really help kids be able to focus as well. So this could be like bringing the basket of laundry to the laundry room, or carrying a heavy stack of books. So maybe when you're done with your homeschool lesson, you're going to ask your child to be the one to put the big stack of books back away. Those kinds of things can be really helpful for them as well. So we just want to get our kids up. We want to get them moving. We want to get them sort of thinking about something different and refocusing their brains in between each of their lessons. And the more that you can add these things in throughout your homeschool day, the better and easier that it will be for your kids to be able to focus. Another thing that you can do that can really help is to do some intentional activities to help your kids work on their attention span and practice their attention span. Because concentration and attention is something that we can work on and practice and help our kids be able to build over time. So, one thing that you can do that can really help with attention span generally is just to have less screen time for your kids overall. I know that screen time can be really helpful sometimes, and there are some really good screen time options for homeschool, especially, and it definitely serves a place. However, there are a lot of studies that have shown that with less screen time, kids have better ability to focus. So it might be something to think about if you're really working on focus with your child and they have a lot of screen time every day. You might try reducing their screen time and just seeing if that helps them be able to focus more, because for many kids it will. Another thing that you can try is some games that will actually help your child to practice concentration and focus and patience. Games like Simon Says or Freeze Tag or Mother May I, any of those games where your child has to wait or they have to take their turn, those can be really good because they can give kids an opportunity to practice those skills of being patient and waiting and staying focused on the activity, even though it's not directly involving them. They can get chances to practice all of those skills within the context of something fun, a fun game. So you can play board games with your kids and card games and any of these kinds of active games where they have to wait and take a turn and concentrate and focus. And that can help them build that skill of being able to focus and concentrate, which will help them over time with focusing on their reading lessons as well. All right, the other thing that I wanted to cover was just some really specific things that you can do during your reading lessons if you've tried a lot of these more general suggestions and it's still not working. So one thing that has really worked well, especially for my daughter, is covering the other lines in the book. So I should have gotten a book. Let's see. Okay, I've got a big bookshelf over here. There's a map on my lap, which is a really cute Dr. Seuss reading storybook all about maps. This is not what I would use for a reading lesson, but it was available. So if I was practicing this maybe with my older child and he was reading it, what I would do is I would take the page that we're reading here, and if we are reading just the first line, I would get a blank sheet of paper. Let's see here. And I would cover up all of the lines except for the very top one. And then after we read the top line, I could slide the paper down so that we could read the next line. So really the only line that's visible, or the top line that's visible, is the one that we're reading. So that can be really helpful just in helping kids be able to focus on the words and the letters that they are actually supposed to be reading. And especially if you have a page with a lot of text on it, you can try covering up those other lines just with a folded sheet of paper or an index card or whatever, and see if that helps your child be able to focus a little bit more on what they are supposed to be reading. That can often really help. Another thing that you can do is you can assign your child the job of pointing with their finger at the words that they're reading. And they can either point at the words that they're reading, or maybe if you're reading the book out loud, they can even point at the words that you're reading. If you really want to get fancy, you could get some sort of like a pencil or a fancy pointer or something that your child can use, but they probably will be just fine just using their finger. And that can help them to be able to focus as well, because now they have that task of needing to point to each of those words, and it really gives them a way to focus their attention on that job of needing to follow the words with their finger. So that's another strategy that can really help. It can also help if kids tend to like look off somewhere else and then they can't find their place again. If they have their finger there, that can really help them to be able to stay focused on what they're reading as well. And then the last thing that you can do is make sure that you're asking questions for your child as they're practicing their reading. So if you're reading out loud to your child, you might stop every so often and just ask them a question that they could answer based on the information that you read. So if you were reading this story about the map on my lap, you might ask them a question about like, what was the place that we were just talking about? Or like, tell me something that you just learned about maps. Or, what do you think is true about this map? So it could be a question where you're just asking them to retell you exactly what you just read to them. Or it might be a question where you're asking them to apply something that you read to something that is true in their life. If you look at any of the side-by-side reading stories in the Reading Better Together curriculum, they have questions like this built in right to the story. There's those little boxes that have the questions right on the pages of the stories, and those are great examples of the kinds of questions that you could be asking. And those kinds of questions will help kids to really think back on what they just heard and hopefully make sure that they're paying attention and that they're hearing what they're reading and that they're starting to comprehend and understand what they're reading as well. So hopefully this was helpful and gave you some ideas to try in helping your kids stay focused on reading. I know that this can be a struggle sometimes, so hopefully it helps to have some new strategies and some things to think about.